interpreting the news, making sense of the headlines. Afternoons with Rob Breakenridge on 770 CHQR. Join the conversation by phone or text 403-974-8255. Out of town toll free 1-800-563-7770. Afternoons with Rob Breakenridge, 770 CHQR.
All right, so as mentioned, just 5 days until Election Day. One last opportunity to get some input, some feedback, some thoughts, some analysis from our Citizens Election Panel. And they have gathered here for one more visit with one change we'll get to in a second. We'll go around the table, though. We've got back with us Mo Getchin. Mo, welcome back.
Thank you.
Deirdre McLean is back here with us. Deirdre, you left your sunglasses here, but we got those back to you, so thanks for coming back. Julie Chute is here as well. Hi, Julie.
You got that right in the last week.
Did I?
You did.
Okay,
Perfect.
good. Check that off for me. And joining us, we have a new voice. Now, Michael's away this week. He was with us the past 2 weeks, but an opportunity to bring a different voice into the conversation. We have with us here, sitting just to my left, Susan Kress. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
All right. Welcome to the panel.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Well, let's get to know you a little bit here, Susan, because we've had our other panelists on a few times here. So, your own thoughts on why you're engaged in this election and kind of maybe the issues or the concerns that you're most motivated by, passionate about.
Yeah, I spent most of my 20-some-odd year career in leadership positions in the nonprofit sector. So I think I focus a lot on community engagement, health of the citizenship. So I think the primary issues for me going into this election is absolutely diversification of our economy. I think that's exceptionally important. I think learning opportunities for children within the education system. Healthcare is not primary at all because I believe our healthcare system is strong. And then also I think issues around mental health, addiction, and human rights. Those are priority areas for me.
Now, and we've asked our other panelists the question. I mean, are you a decided voter? I mean, you can tell us which way you're leaning if you want, but have you made up your mind?
Yeah, I'm pretty close. Like, I've been shopping around for quite some time, and I think my voting patterns over the past 4 elections have varied both federally and provincially. And I think I'm a strong leaning NDP supporter at this point.
Okay. All right. Well, we had the panel here last Thursday, which was debate day. So we were kind of previewing or predicting what the debate might offer. So let's start there, even though it feels like a million years ago. Go around the table. Mo, you watched the debate?
Indeed, I did.
I don't know, a week later, does anything still stand out about it to you, or what did you make of it?
You know, I was surprised that it was as civil as it was. I thought Tara Nelson did a terrific job of kind of moderating it, so it didn't turn into a circus. And I didn't think there's any real winners or losers in it. It was, I would say, fairly vanilla, I guess, would be my overall view of it.
So it didn't really change your view on anything?
No, it didn't. I thought each leader had some weaknesses and each and some strengths, but overall, I thought it was pretty. And I do think that it was Jason Kenney's to lose, which I don't think he did, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Deirdre, what did you think?
About the same. I didn't really see any. There were no standouts. It wasn't like 2015. But I don't really think that anyone won or lost. And yeah, it was, I guess I would agree with Mo, kind of vanilla. I think we all expected more. And I think the bar for Rachel Notley was a lot higher because of her performance in 2015. So I don't know if that's necessarily fair or not to say that she didn't do as well, but I don't believe she did as well as expected.
Yeah. Julie?
I watched the debate, and again this morning, actually, at my desk, I searched it up again to watch it to see if maybe I missed something somewhere.
I appreciate that.
I couldn't find anything to be terribly excited about. I didn't really learn anything new. I just saw Notley and Kenney kind of pointing at each other about what the other had or hadn't done. Didn't really talk about themselves and what they do as much as I would have liked to hear. The only real thing I learned from that debate was I had no idea the Liberal Party was campaigning on proportional representation in the province. So that
Well,
was
I think
new information.
Yeah, I think if anything, the debate really gave David Kahn and Steve Mandel a platform. Where because we've talked so much about the other two so much, so I think just being there and being on that stage was probably good for them in a way. I don't know how much it'll help them in the end, but it must have given them a boost. Susan, did you watch it?
Yeah, I did, and I thought David Kahn did a pretty good job, and I like you was surprised about the proportional representation, but I also think it was just a very disciplined debate across the board, right? Like, I didn't see anybody coming in with a huge vision for the province, which is what I was looking for. This is where I see us in 10 years. These are our strengths. These are the way forward. I thought that was really absent. And I felt like, if anything, people were more entrenched in their position, and nobody was really taking a lot of risks. And I was hoping for some risk taking.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were playing it safe. Now, the other thing I'll ask if any of you heard this week, we had Rachel Notley on the program. She was here Tuesday, I guess it was, yesterday. I can't even remember now. It was this week. I know I heard it because I was sitting here, but I don't know. Did any of you hear Rachel Notley?
Yep.
What did you make of it?
Well, I thought she avoided some of the issues that I think are burning issues in this election. I do recall a bit of an exchange between you and her about the healthcare, the potential changes in the healthcare system. I thought she dodged that a little bit too, or seemed to evade that topic a little bit.
Yeah. Did either of you?
I didn't hear it.
Yeah. And I think, I tried to, be tough but fair. I think I tried to find a balance. I think she came across relatively well, and in terms of responding to the questions, I think she had her talking points. But yeah, she did seem a little uncomfortable when we were talking about kind of the negative campaigning, whether it's been too much or whether people might bristle. Susan, let me put that to you, because we've talked a bit about it on the panel. The tone of the campaign. Does it feel to you as though any of it has been too negative or over the top, or even American style, as some have called it? What have you made of it so far?
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's been, I would call it American style. And I think when you go that negative, it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff and come out with a clear vision of how you're leading the province forward. I would put that across the board, but I would also say, second to that is some of the discourse around human rights has had to happen. And I think that's essential going forward. I hear people saying things like, oh, that's a distraction. We don't need to be talking about LGBT inclusion. We don't need to be talking about gay-straight alliances. And I think this isn't a binary process, right? It's not human rights or a good economy. It's human rights and a good economy. So some of the things that I've seen come forward have felt super negative, but I also think it's something that needs to be discussed, right?
Yeah, and we'll come back to those issues. One thing I wanted to ask you all too, and we were just talking about it before you came in, is the advanced polling. Pretty impressive advanced polling numbers, and I don't know if that's indicative of overall interest in this election or just the ease of advanced polling this year. Have any of you voted yet?
No.
Yeah.
Y'all waiting till Tuesday?
No, absolutely have gone.
I don't know.
You voted?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
When did you vote?
Yesterday.
Was it just the convenience of it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, it's just such a great tool. It makes voting really accessible instead of having everybody do this on one day. I think everybody can just return to what we saw in our last municipal election, where there was lineups and lineups and lineups. And I think we'll see some of that, right? I think people are super engaged. So yeah, I wanted to tick it off the list.
All right. So you're all deliberately waiting until Tuesday?
No.
Or just...
I'm going to vote tomorrow if I can.
You're going to vote tomorrow?
Yeah, because there happens to be a station right near where I work.
Yeah. And
I will probably vote before Tuesday, but I'm struggling.
in terms of you haven't decided yet?
Well, no, I've mostly decided. I just don't know how happy I am with it.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I'll be voting on Tuesday likely. I've the day basically set aside to make sure I get to the polling station. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was, musing before the break about whether we should kind of have like an election week instead of an election day. I don't know how you would, proportion those resources if you need all the polling stations open for an entire week. But I think people like this ease of I'll vote on my own time. Mm-hmm. I just wonder too if, if the campaign is still going, what if something comes up after you voted? Maybe it'll make you change your mind, or people who want to wait till the last minute because they're not totally sure. But this is a pretty good balance of all of that, I think, isn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. And just a quick question. We'll take a break here, but are we expecting higher turnout this time around? Do you all have a sense of the level of engagement in this campaign? You know, how high the stakes are, whether Albertans are really going to turn out in big numbers? And any thoughts, Mo?
Well, I think there'll be bigger numbers than there has been in the past, and actually I really hope there are. I think there's a lot on the table. There's the path for Alberta here for the next 4 years is right before them, and I think people need to take the opportunity to kind of set the table, as it were.
Yeah, Deirdre?
I think people are a lot more engaged, and now the last time that I was on the doors prior to this election was the municipal election for Calgary. And I found that a number of people didn't even know that there was an election coming.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So now that could be again because municipal versus provincial, but the majority of doors that I've gone to, what I'm hearing is people saying that they are paying attention, they have been following it, they know what's going on. So I think that, I hope that that is indicative of a much higher engagement for this election.
Yeah, Julie?
I think people seem more engaged, and I would probably guess, if I was going to bet, I'd say maybe 10 to 15% higher voter turnout, maybe. I think a lot of the people that are heading out to the advanced polls might be people that were going to vote anyway, but I'm hoping that we have a higher voter turnout. I think it's interesting in Alberta when we had so many decades of, I think a lot of people probably didn't vote just because the election was already decided. They didn't feel like it even mattered. And we barely even had an opposition for so long. So it's nice to vote after such a big shakeup and people actually feel like they matter and they can actually make an impact.
Susan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're going to see really good numbers. I think if the advanced polling is any indication, I think there was 104,000 out the past couple of days. If we use that as a temperature check, I think we'll see larger numbers.
Yeah. And just for the record, last election was 58% voter turnout, and that was the highest it had been since the 1993 election. So I think when it's a competitive vote, the stakes are high, you see that engagement, and I think that's what we have this time for sure. All right, we'll take a break here. We'll come back. We'll talk more issues with our Citizens Election panel. We have got with us Mo, Deirdre, Julie, and Susan in with us this week. We are back with more right after. We're back with our Citizens Election panel just a few days before Tuesday's vote. The question of social issues and economic issues and that balance, Susan, you'd alluded to it earlier, that it doesn't have to be one or the other. But for people who are concerned about both and, which party are they most comfortable with? And I think it's a dilemma for a lot of people. What's your sense, though, of for yourself, how you balance those two concerns? People do want, to see the economy improve. People have very legitimate, I think, economic concerns, but I can understand too why people are concerned about these other social issues.
Well, when I kind of go through the inventory, I think, number one, in order to have a prosperous economy, people need to be included, right? So we need to have a diverse workforce. There's a litany of studies that shows diversity as an economic driver. So I want to see policies that reflect the diverse makeup of our province. I think that's really important. I want to see this ongoing kind of onslaught against the LGBT community and the youth cease. I don't think that's been valuable, and it has been a distraction when it doesn't need to be a distraction. Like I think that just needs to be taken off the table, right? So, right. And then so once those things are kind of looked after, then I can start to see a leader have a vision of what the province should be, and I think that vision has to include diversification of our economic system. So, absolutely, for me, it's about how do we get pipelines through. What are the issues around the carbon tax? Is it Alberta driven? Is it federally driven? But I really need to see our economy change. And if there's anything that I've liked about the NDP platform, it's the investment in technology, right? And the looking for renewable energy. That for me is really important when I think of where our province is going to be 20 years out. All of the studies I read say things like, we're not going to go back to the glory days of the 15 years ago. So knowing that, I want to see some leadership around the vision of where we're going to be in the next 20 years with another revenue stream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are interesting points. And I think for both Julie and Deirdre, because we've talked about this previous weeks, that it's about where you're most comfortable, that there's no one party out there that represents you across the board, and you just got to kind of, which party am I most comfortable with? Do you both feel that you've kind of reached that point?
I've often said that I kind of feel, well, especially federally, but even provincially, I've often said I feel like I'm politically homeless. There's no one banner I can really get excited about waving. The closest I've come is the Alberta Party. I think they've got the social issues right, and I think they've got a lot of really great economic ideas too. But like I've said before, I don't love Mandel as a winner. As a leader, and I don't think he's going to win any elections. I loved Greg Clark. But I can't vote for him this election because I just feel like it would be a wasted vote.
Yeah. Deirdre?
I think it does hurt me when people say things like, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for whomever. I realize that's somewhat hypocritical with the things that I've said over the last couple of weeks as well. And like I said, that's why I'm struggling with it. Again, some of the conversations that I've had, I've heard people say, I don't know if I could vote, even though I should vote strategically. I don't know if I could do that because I want to vote for something that I want to vote for. And one of the other things that I heard as well was, something that would give the Alberta Party a big boost is even if they came in second in a number of ridings, then that would tell the party, that would tell the members, that would tell Alberta, we see this as something that we do want in the future, and give them, some motivation to keep going. Because if this election turns out like they think it will, Alberta Party will be lucky to end up with more than 2 seats.
Yeah. And I want to come back to a couple of those points in a sec, but let me get Mo into the conversation. And then, I get the sense from you that you're pretty comfortable where you're at, who you're going to vote for, and that the UCP represents the kind of change Alberta needs. You're still pretty comfortable in that lane at this point.
I am, yes.
And your concerns are primarily economic.
Well, they are. And to Susan's point, I do think that the economy has to come first, especially at this point in time. And without a strong economy, we're not going to have the resources, money, the capital to fund some of the social programs that we like, or like to have or like to see. And I think that the economy has to be the main focus at this point in time, and the social programs, if we can afford them without. And I'm very much against going into debt to do stuff like that as well. So I hopefully we can get the economy going and we can afford them properly without spending more money into debt.
Well, okay, let's do this because we have David who's called in, and David is still not sure who to vote for. So let's see what David has to say. David, you there?
Yeah.
Hi, David. All right. Well, you're on with the panel here. So what are your thoughts?
So my whole life, I have been PC. And this is the first time that I'm listening to the interviews. And typically I vote on party lines, not necessarily about the individual, because I don't know how well I can actually know an individual that I'm voting for. And this round, I'm pausing. And even though I know that in my writing, who most likely is going to get in, I still want to vote just for me to think, am I switching views? And what's holding me up is the comments that have been made over the last month, let's say about education, because I'm in education. It's paused me to think, I feel like we're trying to roll back to the way that things were, and yet we made such huge leaps over the last decades on social issues and moving forward. And I'm like, I love PC, but I feel like they're trying to roll us back to say, no, we don't want JSAs. We don't want to be thinking about these things, putting money into mental health. We just want to think about the finance. And I'm like, whoa. Even things like we're not going to fund for growth in schools. We're going to slow down school builds. I'm like, why are we attacking that side of things? Like, they lost a huge host of voters simply talking about education and our kids.
David, let me ask you that. So if you're not sold totally at this point on the UCP, what would that mean? That you wouldn't vote, that you would vote for somebody else? And if so, who might that be?
Right. And so for me, I was in a province where NDP basically decimated our budget. And so those years ago, for me to vote NDP would be a huge switch. I really like the Alberta Party, but I'm sort of thinking if I vote for the Alberta Party, am I splitting the votes, and it won't really matter in the end. And so...
Okay, so you're still not sure, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
David, thanks for that. All right, panel, we'll take a break. We'll think about that. And I do want to get to that point to talk about whether there's such a thing in this election as a wasted vote, or whether that weighs on the minds of people making this decision, especially in what feels like a two-party race. So we'll continue more here with our Citizens Election panel. We're back with more right after this. All right, back with our Citizens Election panel. And I want to get into this issue, I guess, the question of wasted votes. I think ideally you look at an election, you look at the candidates, and you make a decision. And that's your decision, and that's how you vote. But obviously other factors come into play. Feels like a two-party race, but maybe describing it that way, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way that people think it is. And they figure, I got to vote for one of the two main parties. Now, Mo, you're a UCP voter. Right. And, they have a very good chance of winning the election. But I assume even if you lived in, let's say Rachel Notley's going to win her riding easily. If you lived in that riding, you would still get out and vote UCP, right?
I likely would, indeed, yeah.
Even if you knew, okay, we're not going to defeat Rachel Notley in this riding. But it still matters to vote.
If it's perceived to be a slam dunk, yeah, I would, absolutely.
Yeah. And why is that important to you?
Well, like we talked here off air, was that I think it's important to show that when the final numbers are in, that these other parties, not necessarily just the UCP party, but other parties are also relevant. And I think that creates a stronger government, and it creates, and ultimately perhaps, better engagement by the, by the people that are voting, is that then perhaps they convince themselves that their vote does matter. And it could, eventually it could one day, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even for Derek in the FCP, and I talked to Derek about the debate, and I said, well, Derek, I mean, the one thing you got going against you is you made a deliberate decision to only run in certain ridings. You got 24 candidates. There's no mathematical way you could be the premier. So in terms of what we would do or what we wouldn't do, it kind of becomes a moot point. So for someone who might be leaning that way, there's not even the mathematical possibility that somehow, under some bizarre circumstances, they could win. I mean, at what point does it become a worthwhile endeavor then in voting for a party that cannot possibly be the government?
I think that you find, look at David Swan. Mm-hmm. David Swan was, according to people I've talked to who door knock in the riding, that there were people who considered themselves to be Swanites. They were supporters of David Swan. They liked the representation that he gave them, and they kept re-electing him, even though it was very unlikely the Liberals were going to form government. Right. Greg Clark, again, I mean, he was amazing for his term in the legislature. He made change. He made excellent arguments. He did a fantastic job. So in some cases, I think that people really do look at their representation and what they're getting for that vote. And even though this party won't actually form government, they know that they've got someone who is an excellent representative and someone who will fight for their riding. And I mean, it's tough though, I think it's tough for people to really display that if they're not very well known in their communities, or even if they're not well known in the riding as a whole. So again, and actually to Mo's point, in a riding where you know that it might be a slam dunk, it might be easier to go out and vote your conscience. Now, if you were in Rachel Notley's riding and the UCP candidate actually looked like, or not the UCP candidate, but if you were in a riding where the NDP, it was the NDP or Alberta Party, and it was really going up and down, and you knew that your vote could make a difference.
Different question, different conversation.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You know, the funny thing is, by the way, the Rachel Notley's riding, because it's a hypothetical question. There is no UCP candidate. There's a PC and a Wildrose candidate, because they wanted to keep those parties at least existing on paper so no one would come in and, you know, steal the name and try to make trouble. So it's a weird little tidbit in this campaign. Julie, what are your thoughts?
I kind of agree with a lot of what Deirdre just said. I remember back in the day, I actually voted for Raj Panu in Edmonton.
Oh, yeah?
Back in the conservative heyday. I never actually leaned left, and I was never an NDP supporter, but I liked him. I liked what kind of a representative he was. And even though I was more of a PC supporter, I wanted them to have like some opposition on the ledge, right? Like, geez, come on, someone. So I think there's a lot of different things you can do with your vote. I know if I was in someone like Greg Clark's riding or some of the other Alberta parties' ridings, I would vote for them, even though I knew that they would never have a chance of forming government, but I had trusted they'd be a good representative. I know for me personally, in my riding, we're a new riding, and we're kind of compiled of a mishmash of rural Wildrose riding. A good chunk of it was NDP last time, and a bunch of other parts. So I don't know which way we're going to go, and I really do want to see the NDP out. So in this particular case, I feel like I do need to vote for my best chance of making that happen rather than voting with my heart.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at it that way. As I said earlier, you know, a few weeks ago, I think people are in a lot of ways voting against something. That I want the NDP gone, I guess I got to go UCP. I want to stop Jason Kenney, I guess I got to vote NDP. And it doesn't leave a lot of room in between. But Susan, what's your sense?
Yeah, I think you have to vote for who you believe is going to be your best representative. And I think it's, you know, when we were off air, we were talking about Calgary Mountain View a bit. And I think Angela Kokott in that area is doing a bang up job. And what I hear is people believing that she would be an awesome advocate for that riding. Mm-hmm. I also really liked Mo's comment that this is about momentum building, right? It gives a lens into how people are feeling about the intensity, the, you know, backdoor politics happening in this election. And if you can anchor yourself somewhere between the NDP and the UCP, I think that's good for the province, right? So,
by the way, does anybody think that any of this makes the case for changing our electoral system? That you could get 50% of the vote, but 100% of the seats? Or you could have 10 or 15% of the vote, have nothing to show for it? I mean, personally, I think our system's got flaws. I wouldn't change it, but I don't know, just anyone show of hands. Anyone think that there's a case to be made for this?
Yes, absolutely. Especially looking at and listening to the number of people that are saying things like, I have to stop Jason Kenney, or I don't want the NDP back in, and notice that it's very personal there. But that it's a false choice. Right? Believing that you only have these two options, it puts a lot of pressure on people to, you know, like we're saying, vote for something that they don't necessarily want because they're more afraid of the other thing. So it's...
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people are voting that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's take another quick break here. We'll come back, a few other issues to hit on, and maybe we'll get to some predictions if the panelists are comfortable with that as we get close to April 16th. All right, so we're here with our Citizens Election panel. We are back with more right after. All right, we're back with Mo and Deirdre and Julie and Susan, our Citizens Election panel, looking ahead to next Tuesday's vote. We talked about the negativity, and I heard it mentioned recently that we've got kind of a polarized province at the moment. And regardless of who wins the election on Tuesday, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to be really upset and really think the worst about the premier. How do we get past that? Does anyone have any thoughts on what that's going to be like after the vote? And whether we can just kind of accept the results? and see how things play out. What's your sense of what the mood on the day after is going to be? Who wants to have a go at that? Mo, what do you think?
Well, I always, when I hear polarization in an election or any kind of anything that deals with leadership, my first go-to position on that is that's poor leadership. If you have polarization, you have poor leadership. A good leader will unite, and he or she will unite regardless of their political stripes or their ideals. And I think that's what's been lacking so far is we just haven't had that strong leadership to bring all people together. And I think that's one of the missing ingredients so far in the last 4 years.
Yeah. Well, Susan, let me put it to you, because as you said, you're kind of leaning NDP in this election. So, if indeed, as the polls suggest, Jason Kenney is our next premier, I mean, how do you feel about that? Are you willing to kind of give him a chance and see how he approaches these things, or are you going to be really distraught, concerned on Wednesday?
Oh, wow. So I would be really concerned. Yeah, I would be really concerned. Of course, you're going to give anybody a chance, but I think that chance comes with conditions, right? I think there needs to be a lot of internal soul searching within the UCP party as to why they've had 5, 6, 7 candidates with strong homophobic, racial, and misogynistic overtones
25.
meet their, did you say 25 candidates? Yeah, make their slate. I think that is of huge concern. That is really significant. So when I looked at that over the past couple of days and I thought to next week, I was like, okay, am I being paranoid? And it's like, no, a selection process like that feels intentional, right? And it feels intentional that you're trying to push a very important and large part of the community out of the way. It doesn't signal that anybody in your leadership team is going to be reaching out to diverse communities. And so I would look, should that happen, and I hope that doesn't happen, for that leadership team to be building bridges with those communities. Okay. And I think that has to be first on board. Right? Yeah.
Julie, what do you think?
I'm not optimistic, to be honest. I think that I totally agree with what we've been saying about leadership just now and how a good leader would build bridges and kind of try and bring everyone together and stop the divisiveness and say, that was the campaign. Now we're all in this together and unite people. But I don't see a lot of the hardcore NDP supporters and kind of the people to the left ever being able to get on board with Kenney, to be honest. I just don't.
Deirdre?
Same. It's because it has been because it's been so aggressive, I think. I might spend a little bit too much time online, but not even online, but the events and things that I go to that are of a political nature, it is very divisive. There's zero support within the UCP for another term with Rachel Nolley. So, they wouldn't get on board if she won the election again.
Yeah.
And I don't know who mentioned this recently. It could have even been you within the last couple of weeks, where I thought that someone had said that one of the reasons why we're so polarized right now isn't necessarily because of anything other than the parties are just so different. Their focus is so different that's where the polarization is coming from. It's coming from the focus on something that is, and not saying that the economy isn't important to the NDP, and not fully saying that social issues aren't important to the UCP, but they've made they drew their lines in the sand and they said, this is what we are standing for, this is what we're running for. And so it's giving you the impression that it's one or the other. That's kind of where this polarization is coming from, because a lot of people are saying, I don't agree. So where does that leave me?
Yeah, interesting point. All right, let's take one more break. We'll come back. We'll close up with some final thoughts, maybe some predictions for Tuesday. A few more minutes here with our Citizens Election panel. We're back with more right after. All right, a few more minutes here with our Citizens Election panel. One last time before Tuesday's votes. And let's go around the table in terms of I mean, overall predictions, or I'm curious, we talked about some of the smaller parties. If you've got a prediction about maybe one or more of them still having a presence in the legislature after Tuesdays, Susan, what do you expect?
I think Greg Clark's a go for sure. I'm going to put my money there. I think he's done a lot of groundwork in Calgary Elbow. I'm going to go. It's going to be a minority government because.
Ooh, interesting.
That's
for who? But. Ooh. Well, if that's, if you want to just go that far, it's still a prediction.
I'll just go that far.
Sure, fair enough. Julie, what do you think?
I predict the Alberta Party will probably get somewhere in between 2 to 4 seats. Greg Clark will definitely be one of them. And I think that the UCP is either going to have a very slim majority or it'll be a minority government.
All right. Deirdre.
I have no confidence in what is going on in Alberta politics right now. I feel like there's a chance that the NDP could retain, the majority of Edmonton, that they could retain some seats in Calgary. I don't see them managing to form government, but I can't say. I think it's still kind of volatile. We're still, 5 days away? Mm-hmm. 2012, it only took 3. So I don't have a lot of confidence in saying really anything, but I do agree. I think that the Alberta Party could pick up some seats, and I still find it just very volatile.
All right. Well, what's your sense?
Well, I think it's going to be a majority UCP government. I'm thinking between 60 and 65, and the NDP 15 to 20, and then a handful of other Alberta Party, and maybe even Derek Fildebrand might scoop a seat there. So, but overall, I'm thinking 2/3.
I would come down. I think it is going to be a UCP majority, maybe not over 60, but perhaps close to 60. I'll actually be surprised. I'm a little less bullish on the smaller parties. I'll be surprised if we see any of them in the legislature after this. I think they bring something to, the legislature. I think Greg Clark's been a great MLA, for example, but I don't know. Just feels like it's just the two big parties are sucking out all the oxygen. But I guess we'll see on Tuesday night. Could be an interesting night. I guess there's a possibility we might not even know Tuesday night, depending on how it goes, right? Well, this has been a lot of fun, and hopefully you all had fun. Thanks so much for coming in, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so that's Mo, Deirdre, Julie, and Susan, our Citizens Election Panel. We appreciate their input and their feedback, and I guess we'll see what happens on Tuesday. Obviously, we still got a few days before Election Day, and we still got some time here today. We got some other issues we'll get to. Our election topic of the day today is the issue of families. We're going to talk a bit about that after 2 o'clock. Michelle Rempel joins us coming up after 2:30. We're going to talk about refugees. And paleontologist Steve Brissett joins us later on this afternoon. We're going to talk about his new book, The Rise and Fall of Dinosaurs. So we still got a lot more to get to today. My name is Rob Breakenridge. This is Afternoons on 770 CHQ.